Hello and welcome to another TLDR UK video. The UK may have just left a major international grouping, that being the EU, but some are already advocating for the UK to join another, much more English-speaking grouping. This is the CANZUK proposal, which would see Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK forming a community of nations, uniting them towards common aims. We actually made a video on CANZUK back in May of 2019, but it continues to be a video that a lot of people watch. So with the UK now officially out of the EU, with the UK-EU deal finalised, and Britain now free to forge its own trade deals and relationships, we thought it was worth revisiting. So is CANZUK really a vision of a new powerful alliance, or is it a fantasy to pull back together some old Commonwealth mates? That's exactly what we'll find out in this video. If you're interested in this video and about international collaboration more generally, you might want to check out the TLDR Global channel. In the past, we've released global news stories right here on TLDR UK, but now they have their own dedicated home. You can check out the channel and the 2 videos we've already posted there by clicking the link in the description. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our international coverage as it transitions to the new channel. Before we dive into the world of CANZUK, it's worth really emphasising that this is a theoretical grouping of nations. It might have a logo and a crest crowded with animals, but it's all just an idea at the moment. It does have some high-profile fans, as we'll discuss later, but we really need to emphasise that this isn't real, at least not for now. It seems sensible to start by outlining the group's proposed member states, which are, as the name clumsily suggests, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the United Kingdom. And at least if Australia decides to bail on the plans, the name doesn't have to change, and Canada will get 2 letters just like the others. Anyway, you might be wondering why this rather disparate group of countries has been pulled together into this hypothetical community. Because it's certainly not proximity or continental arrangements that make this one possible. No, instead, the group is said to be chosen for other cultural, political, economic and linguistic reasons. First then, as you already know, all of these countries have a common language, which certainly makes some things easier. Secondly, they all have fairly influential global democracies. Thirdly, they're all members of the Commonwealth, which is another very complicated grouping which we can discuss another day. But for now, let's just acknowledge the obvious, that the UK's already managed to sneak its flag onto 2/3 of their partners, and the Queen's already the head of state of all 3. Fourthly, they're all pretty major economies. If we're doing it by GDP, then you've got the world's 5th, 9th, 13th, and sorry New Zealand, 52nd biggest economies in the grouping. Though if we're doing it per capita, the Kiwis do have a better shot. According to supporters then, these similarities and the natural political and cultural alliances between these countries mean that it's a pretty perfect fit. And according to them, the countries should absolutely form a grouping, working together even closer now that the UK has left the EU. Speaking of the EU though, this proposed community has actually been compared to the European Economic Community and would see the countries increase trade between them, using trade liberalisation and the reduction of trade barriers. They'd also increase cooperation on issues like foreign policy and military action, as well as allowing citizens to move freely between the 4 countries. Let's go through those in slightly more detail. Let's start with the economic and trade part of the proposal, and this is where CANZUK differs notably from the EU. The basis for trade liberalisation would be through mutual recognition. If something is good enough to sell in Canada, it's good enough to sell in Australia, New Zealand and the UK. Because of this limited integration, there wouldn't be the need for a commission or parliament to draft or approve regulations. The other pillar of CANZUK trade would be the mutual recognition of qualifications, which is similar, but is particularly important for the service sector, such as lawyers and architects, who under the plan will be able to easily work between nations. And trade between the countries isn't new. Before the UK joined the EEC, the UK was Australia's largest trading partner. Australia sent food and agricultural products to the UK, while the UK sent back manufactured goods, like British Leyland cars. Joining the EEC caused a significant cut-off of Australian and Kiwi producers to their largest partner, which was clearly difficult at the time. When it comes to foreign policy and military cooperation, the proposed model would build on the existing areas of cooperation, Existing cooperation, such as the fact that the Royal Canadian and Australian Navy's new frigates are based on the Royal Navy's Type 26 City-class frigate. Going forward then, CANZUK cooperation would see each country working closely on international developments, as was the case with the joint response issued regarding the Hong Kong national security law. The argument is that the shared interests, values and outlook on issues from China to standing up for the liberal democratic values that underpin CANZUK make it easier for the group to speak and act as a collective. Finally then, let's also discuss the movement of people, with a key element of CANZUK being the proposal that citizens will be allowed to travel freely between the states. Now, to Brits, this might sound familiar, as it's already very similar to the freedom of movement they just lost when they exited the EU. Anyway, the new model would see Brits able to travel, live and work in the other 3 member states, and vice versa. Some people are very keen on this whole idea too, with an official organisation even being set up to support and advocate for CANZUK. Some people in high places are also advocating for the plan. The head of the Canadian Conservative Party and official leader of the opposition, Erin O'Toole, highlighted CANZUK as a major priority when running to lead his party in 2020. And with his run successful, it's likely that the Conservatives will continue to make it a major priority if they were to win office. In New Zealand, the former National Party's leader and leader of the opposition, Simon Bridges, has also advocated for the plan. Their PM has also suggested a potential appetite for the plans, and while not officially supporting a CANZUK proposal, she emphasised the importance of their relationship with the UK, something she said she'd like to deepen. Speaking of the UK then, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has also shown an interest in a deal with the CANZUK nations, while other members of his party have even started a Conservatives for CANZUK movement, including Conservative heavyweight Jeremy Hunt. Not everyone's bought into this vision though, with some sceptical about the feasibility and even desirability of such a proposal. We might have briefly run through some of the similarities and connections between the countries, but maybe we didn't say everything, because while there's some logic linking them together, their economies are pretty different, as are their populations. The biggest issue is one we didn't actually touch on much already though, the geography. That's because when it comes to trade and collaboration like this, distance is still important. While we might live in a world where you can import garbage YouTube merch from anywhere in the world, link in the description, that doesn't mean that these countries will be your natural trading partners. After all, at the moment, there's not a whole lot of trade going on between these countries. Looking at the UK's trading partners, Canada comes in 18th, Australia in 19th, and New Zealand isn't even in the top 20. For Canada, the UK's in 5th, Australia in 20th, and again, New Zealand doesn't break the top 20. For Australia, the UK is their 6th largest trading partner. New Zealand comes in 10th, and Canada doesn't make the list. And finally, from New Zealand's perspective, Australia's in 2nd, the UK's in 9th, and Canada in 17th. The point is that these states simply aren't natural trading partners. They do trade, but combined, here's the percentage of trade that each of them does with the other CANZUK nations. Sure, they're likely to trade more under the CANZUK arrangement, but it's unlikely to ever be substantial. Take the UK. Although they've left the European Union, they continue to have relatively free trade with the Union, with only relatively limited non-tariff barriers. So why would they choose to trade with states thousands of miles away when they could trade easier and cheaper with their neighbours? Look at Norway as an example. Here's their list of biggest trading partners as of 2019. They're not an EU member state either, but their biggest trading partners are, or at least were at the time. Why? Well, because they're neighbours. Even though the UK has left the EU, doesn't mean that they'll suddenly want to start shipping their goods halfway around the world. Ultimately then, one of the major counter-arguments about this proposal is that it isn't a genuinely important agreement. Sure, it connects together countries which have historically been allies, and they certainly do have other arrangements, such as the existing Five Eyes alliance, but that doesn't mean that they're ideal trade partners. As Nick Cohen wrote for The Spectator, it's a Eurosceptic fantasy that the Anglosphere wants Brexit. This argument is taken even further by some, suggesting that the whole thing is the latest variant of a long line of projects seeking to consolidate the British settler empire. Projects that were, until deep into the second half of the 20th century, justified in explicitly racist terms. Along the lines of racism, some have questioned why countries like South Africa, India, Pakistan, or the Caribbean nations haven't been included in the grouping, if it's really supposed to be all about shared history, with them suggesting that proponents are more interested in the Anglosphere, shared language, and race than they are genuinely about trade and the Commonwealth. With arguments for and against CANZUK continuing to grow, and major politicians seemingly taking an interest in the proposal, we'll have to wait and see whether this hypothetical grouping will become a reality. What do you think though? Does it seem like a solid plan for economic prosperity? Or is it just a hypothetical dream that appeals more to those that think the British Empire continues to shine brightly than those who are actually paying attention to the numbers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. One last thing, we briefly mentioned the CANZUK countries' flags, and while 3 share a motif, they're pretty iconic in their own right. If you're interested in that kind of thing, you should cast a vote in our flag survey. We want you to have your say and help us decide what the best flag in the world is. You can click the link in the description and vote on a random selection of flags to help us choose the world's best. The results will be published on the TLDR Global channel, so be sure to subscribe over there to get the final results. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.